What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video I want to go over my top 3 things that Ghost of Tsushima cannot do in their game. So these are things that I'm maybe slightly worried about, or these are just generally things that if the game does, I feel like is going to hurt its overall quality. I kind of want to make more videos like this, also talk about things that the game should have or that I want in the game. So, I mean, you can look at this as a negative video. I'm super excited for this game. I'm getting this game day one. As the days go on, I'm looking more and more forward to this game. So this is not an attack video. This is just something that I thought I wanted to, I want to bring to you. And again, I'm very much willing to do videos on the other side of it if you guys want me to. Now, really quickly, before I jump in, I want to promote our second channel, my second channel. The link for it will be in the description below. I cover the same kind of stuff here as I do over there. So there are different topics on different games, different movies, but it's not content that you'll see here. So if you guys have not yet checked out that channel, there'll be Ghost of Tsushima stuff there too once this game gets closer and actually comes out. So if you guys have not checked it out, it'll be in the description below. Okay, let's go over these 3 things. Now, I've mentioned these in passing in past videos, and I've talked about, my concerns with Ghost of Tsushima, but I kind of wanted to wrap it up, in one kind of succinct video here and talk about, in order, my top 3 things. So these are only mine, and I definitely want to hear from you guys. If you guys have things that you think the game, should not do, like, things that you needed to keep out of this game, definitely let me know. The first thing, which is technically like the lowest of these, okay, so technically number 3, is the game being too short. The game can't be too short. Now here's the deal. I think that you're gonna make your game's length whatever you're gonna make it, and if it's short, it's short, and if it's gonna be filled in that short amount of time, that's completely fine. So I'm not saying like, oh man, shorter games, smaller games are bad. No, actually, I sometimes prefer those, because sometimes when you balloon games, right, when you make games really big, and people are having that discussion right now, even with like The Last of Us, when you like double the size of a game from one game to the other, you have to be able to fill it with a lot of stuff, and sometimes that can actually hurt the game, right, because you're putting in unnecessary things, you're stretching it out, you're adding things that people don't like, you know what I mean? So you can run into those issues. At the same time, the genre of what the game is very important. So this is an open world game. I mean, there's no other way to say it. It's going to be bigger than Infamous Second Son. I mean, they're used to doing open world games. Okay, it's not like Sucker Punch has never done an open. Even you go back to the Sly Cooper franchise; those were technically open world. Okay, they weren't massive. They were extremely small, especially by today's standards. But they were open world. You went around. You could do whatever you wanted. In the restraints of the world. But then you obviously had different quests, different things to do. So for Ghost of Tsushima, it's the same thing, really. Obviously, it's just expanded a bunch. But we've heard the game length of being like 40 to 50 hours. That's great. That's a nice length. However, when developers tell you the length of a game, normally you subtract some time. It's not normally the exact amount. I believe even with what Naughty Dog was saying of the game being around double the length of The Last of Us, and I guess again, some people did actually take that long. If you really look for everything in The Last of Us Part 2 and you do everything, the game can take 40, 45 hours, which is definitely actually more than double the length of the first game. It took me like 23, 24 hours, which is not double, okay? So I technically shaved off, let's say, 10 hours from the amount of time that they said. So if they say Ghost of Tsushima is 40 to 50, it's possible it's only like 30 to 35, 30 to 40, which is still long. I'm not saying that's not, I'm not saying that's super short, but you got to keep that in consideration. It may not be as big and as long as we all want. Again, if it's going to, and because you can also run into problems with it being long. If it's 50, if it's 55 hours, is there things to, I mean, it could take you 50 hours to beat it, but if they're all like meaningless things you're doing and nothing's fun and everything's boring, then I mean, you're not really going to want to do it for 50 hours, you know what I mean? So that's definitely a problem too, but I think with a game like this, especially where people's expectations are going into a game like this, I think it does need to have, and we're going to talk about that because that's actually my number one worry, it needs to have a lot of things, but it also needs to be a long experience. I mean, like it or hate it, and I know The Last of Us Part 2 is selling like hotcakes, but a lot of people that were going to get now not everybody, but a lot of people, a handful of people at least on the internet, right, that wanted to get The Last of Us Part 2, they're not getting it, they're getting Ghost of Tsushima instead. They want an experience. I mean, people who played The Last of Us Part 2, they got some kind of experience, right? But people want an experience with Ghost of Tsushima, so we'll have to see when the game comes out how long it truly is taking people to beat it. My number 2 concern is the main character. Now, whenever you make a game like this, and the kind of homage to the samurai and all that kind of stuff. I mean, the main character. Let's just say this: in a game, the main character is very important, right? You need to care for them, or I guess they can do different things with the character, but most times you're caring for the main character. You want them to succeed. You're whatever their ideology is, you're backing them, right? I truly will say this: I think with the game that they're making, it is more difficult. And I don't know, I can't really put a needle on why, but I truly do think it is more difficult to make us care for a character like this. Maybe it's because it's more built on realism, it's more grounded, you know what I mean? And maybe it's like Japanese and stuff like that. So, there are different reasons, but I truly do believe that, like, I feel like it's going to be harder to like this character than, say, like Cole in the first Infamous, right? You have superpowers, and you can choose to be good or bad. Now, his personality wasn't the greatest in the first Infamous game, and they haven't really, and that's another thing, though. Truly, that is a thing. I like Cole. I actually love Cole. I want Infamous 3. I never wanted Second Son, but he wasn't the greatest character in 1. He really, I think, came into his own in 2, and I think he became a really solid character. And then they made Delson with Infamous Second Son. I would say, Cole, the first Infamous 1's Cole was not as bad as Delson, in my opinion. Now, some people actually like Delson, though, so this is just my opinion. I wouldn't say Sucker Punch is the greatest at making likable or really like connected like characters that we play as. I really don't think they're the greatest at it. I don't think they're the worst at it, but you look at what Naughty Dog did with like Joel and Ellie. Again, Last of Us Part 2 aside, you look at like Kratos, you look at Nathan Drake, you look at like just pick a Sony first party game and pick even like Aloy is a very likable character, right? You look at all these characters. I don't know if Sucker Punch is able to do it as well. And maybe they can. I'm not saying they won't be able to, but it is a worry of mine that if you're, again, kind of actually, and all these add on to each other. So you're going to be playing this game for 40, 50 hours, and we hope it's a nice long game. But if you're playing that game with a character that you don't like, or don't like, but don't even care about, right? You're just kind of playing it to play it. You don't really care what happens to this character. You don't care about his story, his motivations. Is it really going to be that amazing of a game? You know what I mean? So I think in general, in order to make a really good game, you gotta have you have to have a character that you actually like. Again, could be one of the problems with The Last of Us, right? Ellie's super, super likable. She's super good, but then obviously there's another side to that coin, right? Which we won't get into. But so that is definitely a concern of mine, and definitely one more than the game length when we're talking about the main character. And the number one thing, this is easily my number one thing. And the number one thing is the open world itself, being livable, being lived in is what I'm afraid of, that it's not going to be that. Okay, so the game cannot have basically a dead world. And this is, honestly, with open world games, and if you guys know kind of like my backstory with games in general, I'll catch you up to speed if you don't. But, I really do think this is the most important thing with an open world game. I have a very hard time beating games. I have a very hard time beating open world games. I've done a lot better in 2020. I've beaten actually like 15 plus games in 2020, more than I've beaten in the past like 3-4 years combined. But open world games have always been the hardest for me because I've tried to do everything in them and I really want to experience the whole world. But what open world games can sometimes forget about is being lived in. Truly, I think Witcher is maybe like one of the golden standards that, although that game is 5 years old, you go into that world and I bought in. I truly believe that people are doing things in this world. You know what I mean? That things are genuinely happening in this world. Sometimes different games, not even open world games, you can have different games like JRPGs even, where they can make you feel the same thing, right? However, there's some open world games, mainly by Bethesda, I will say, mainly like the Fallout games, that don't. Now again, Fallout is supposed to kind of feel like that, but let me tell you, going into like, say, Fallout 4. So I believe Fallout 4 came out the September, or like I don't think September, but the fall after Witcher. So Witcher came out the spring, okay, that spring of 2015, and then Fallout 4 came out the fall. And I remember, I didn't even play all that much of The Witcher. To this day, I haven't beaten The Witcher. I haven't played more than like 10, 15 hours. I love the game. I'm going to actually go back and play it, but I've never, gotten, super far in it. But let me tell you, from the small amount of time I did play of The Witcher, and then the next open world game I played was Fallout, it was disturbing and disgusting how unlived in the Fallout. Now again, Fallout, there's not a lot of people out there, but in what the people that are actually there, like who was actually in that world, it still felt so just not anything happen. Like, it felt boring. It felt like you're going into these cities where there were sometimes people, but you didn't feel like they were doing anything when you left. You didn't feel like they did anything before you got there. You know what I mean? That is, in my opinion, that is such an important aspect of an open world game. Actually, in my opinion, it is the most important, because it's open world. It's a world. You want to make, and really in any game, you want to get us to believe the world we're in. In The Last of Us, you want to get us to believe it's a post-apocalyptic infected world. You know what I mean? Every single game needs to get you in that. And so for an open world, the world needs to feel like things are happening. Now, what I will say is Ghost of Tsushima does actually feel like that. And I think that, I mean, I guess from what we've seen, right? I don't know for sure, but when you have to go into like camps and take out the enemies and stuff like that, and sometimes they can like retake them back and other things like that. I think that's a really cool thing. I think the different kind of gameplay that we've seen of you entering like a base and taking them out, I feel like there is definitely a way with the wind kind of leading you, with like fires always like sparking up. I feel like the world will always feel like there's something going on in it. So I'm not, I am worried about it. And again, I think it's the most important thing that the game can't mess up. If there's one thing the game can't mess up, it's that, the world is dead. You know what I mean? It needs to be lived in. So that is my number one thing. That is my number one concern. At the same time, to be honest with you, because it is so glaring and because it is like the biggest thing that I can think of, and I think a lot of people would probably, you guys can, agree or disagree in the comments, but I think a lot of people would probably agree. I think that they will probably end up putting a lot of work into this. So, out of all of these, I think this is the most important. At the same time, I may be the least concerned about it, because I feel like when you're making an open world, the number one thing you have to do is make sure that there's things to do, that the world is constantly moving and things are happening. You know what I mean? So I feel like Sucker Punch probably knew this and knows this, going in, and has probably already done it. Okay, so again, this is I think this is the most important thing, but I'm not necessarily as concerned about it as the other two. I feel like if I had to pick one of these to be the most concerned about, it would probably be the character. I'm not sold on the character. I'm not sold that Sucker Punch can do an amazing character. You know what I mean? So I would say that's my biggest concern of these three. So guys, let me know in the comments below. I thought this was a fun video to do, very different kind of video, but let me know what you think. What are some things that you think the game cannot do? Let me know. As always, make sure you guys are subscribed to this YouTube channel, Podcast Now. Hit the bell icon so you guys know when these videos go up. And I'm going to be continuing this Ghost of Tsushima coverage. The review embargo lifts on July 14th. The game comes out July 17th, so lots of videos between now and then. And then, of course, I'll be covering the game when it actually releases, okay? Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all on the next video.